Hello, this is Jason Thornton and Tim Rush, and we are with Memorial Drive Church of Christ, and this is our post-sermon conversation where we just discuss the sermon that was presented this time by Tim, and he presented as part of our Lion versus Lion series, just focusing in on the combatant that is the other lion, the devil. And so I thought you did a great job really contrasting the Lion of Judah with him. I do have a question to get us started. Our focus verse is 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8 and 9, talking about describing the lion. But you began with verse 1, honing in on the elders and the younger men. And so I was just curious, why did you find that important to start there?
Yeah, so let me just say for our audience at home, this is our third try at this because either my Wi-Fi keeps dropping or each time I just want to hear Jason say again that I did a good job yesterday. Like maybe that's
Next I'm going to tell you failed miserably.
maybe that's really what's going on. Yeah, so that's a good question. Generally, I do think that context is needed. But yeah, so I think it's always a good habit to go back and look at the context of what's being said. But at the same time, we only have 15 minutes to preach. And so it's hard to do that. So any given Sunday, you could be asking me the opposite. Why add context? Why not add context? In this one, though, I was really drawn to verse 7. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. I really felt like that was an important note to have. And why are we talking about Satan? Draw in the relational aspect of God caring that we know that Satan is out there prowling around and that this isn't just data. That God isn't just saying, this is data, you need to know, but that there's a relational aspect of him drawing us into, and so then if I were going to go back and just say young men, I felt like then it would lose the aspect of where that conversation starts, that he's talking to the elders first. Yeah, so then when I looked at it, it even made me think, so if we think God is drawing us into relationship with him, and he's giving us an important piece here from the aspect of a loving father, I almost feel like it's easier to imagine a loving father sitting down, expressing his joy over Larry Cheatham than it is me. And I say that universally. Like, I think we all look at Clint Davis and we go, oh yeah, I can imagine God being really, really pleased with Clint, but not so much with me. So I wanted to start there with men that I think we universally look up to and can easily see, yeah, that would be God's tone with them, to try to accept, yeah, and it would be God's tone with me too, that God would feel that way towards me also, that this is a father-son conversation and not a out there piece of data.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad you shared that way, and I picked up on the spirit of it, but it just hit me. This is not, I grew up watching Saturday Night Live and the church lady and how the church lady Dana Carvey, would turn to the side quickly and say Satan, and it just added to this caricature. And you were contextualizing it, of course, Peter was. But you're wanting to emphasize that context of this was delivered from a father to his children. This is not scandal. This is not controversial. I'll tell you, I'm really glad we're talking about this, because that makes it even more, I don't know, attainable to me to put that into my mind of this is much more like a father taking his child and out of an exuberance, out of this mutual sense that the father's proud of his child, and he's sharing a variety of thoughts, including this warning about the, in our terminology, this combatant that is going to try to shred everything he has built up in this child, in our metaphor at least. And the key there is you use this term, and I thought was really good, just about you using the term here of you're made in God's image. God is taking you and he's assuring you this, but the devil's going to be doing the opposite work. And no, I thought that's really, really good.
Yeah, and again, we don't have time to say everything that we want to, but I think it goes with the James 4 passage of resist the devil and he will flee from you. And that's followed up with draw near to God and he will draw near to you. And I think it's that same piece of relationship. This is not just, it's not an algebra book where you learn an equation and that's what the equation, that's how you go with it each time. I think it's a relationship that God is saying, I really want to be in relationship with you. I really want for you to draw near to me because that's my goal, is to draw near to you.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's useful for me periodically to step back and think, what is the Bible about really? And it's been called a variety of things, but at its root it's the same message. God comes to people who desperately need saving, and he provides that salvation. And functionally, then he shares story after story after story of him doing that with different people in different times and different places. And he shows very honestly the good ways they respond, the bad ways they respond, the absolute awful ways they respond when they completely reject him out of hand and turn to their own ways completely. But it's like this retelling of the story many times over. With the progression to the final climactic, here's the answer, it's Jesus himself. Whereas in the meantime, you're waiting, and we covered that some last week, is this idea of this, who's going to provide this salvation that's, clearly desired beginning in Genesis 3. And I think that's good. So this is just basically every story or every section of scripture, including in the letters, is still unpacking that same message, but to people in specific situations.
Yeah.
And so they apply to other situations. There's something really fine-tuned about Peter writing to this group of people at this time.
Yeah. As you were preaching last week, I actually thought one thing that could be interesting would be to walk through some of the stories and ask, what did Satan want? We know God is seeking relationship, God is seeking restoration. What did Satan want? And then how is he going about it? And we may move into that a little bit in the first of the year when we look at his schemes a little bit more. And we may not do it that way at all. But I just thought it's fascinating to have that view of scripture that he is at work and that the 12 spies sent into Canaan, he wanted them to be afraid. He had a specific goal to wreck God's plan. Just for the idea of realizing he has a goal to wreck God's plan. And it almost feels like at Memorial, we can feel it. We can feel the turbulence. And I want to be careful in saying this. Before the fire ever happened, there was turbulence at Memorial, and we felt like we had momentum, and we felt like God was really doing something. And then there was a fire, and because we've talked about since that space between August and COVID, feeling like, did we have any original thoughts during that time, or were we just trying to keep our heads above water and then COVID hits? And so now are we living in originality and creativity and imagining and dreaming, or are we just trying to make it? So it's not hard to imagine. Yeah, Satan sees something that God is doing, where God is at work and wants to thwart, um, wants to put stumbling blocks.
Oh, you're absolutely right. So the idea of I just love the picture. So you have the father with his child, and he's sharing these things, and so this concept of this roaring lion comes up, and you and I have talked about that roaring is a signal of dissatisfaction, and how he's not the devil is not a lion. He's like a roaring lion, meaning he's a perpetually dissatisfied, somewhat powerful being. And he's immediately connected to the idea that he wants to devour.
Yeah, and I think you've made this point in conversations, and I wish I would have made this point yesterday. His goal is to transfer that dissatisfaction onto us. That's his. Uh-oh, are we frozen again?